Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Majeski, Secretary of the Delaware Department of Transportation, and we're excited to launch our new safety awareness campaign, Be Delaware Towards Zero Deaths. We want all of you to join us and be a hero towards zero and sign our new safety awareness pledge. In doing so, you're saying that you will be safe and responsible when using all modes of transportation. We need all of you to keep everyone safe. Please visit our website, bedelaware.deldot.gov, for more information and to sign our pledge. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to On the Move with DelDOT. I'm C.R. McLeod, Director of Community Relations. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today for our second podcast. We're excited today to be talking about safety. April is a big month of focusing on safety here at the Department of Transportation. We're having our first safety summit later this month. We'll touch on that. It's also National Work Zone Safety Awareness Week coming up. And it's just a good time of year to talk about safety because we're all eager to get outside. There's more people out walking, biking, just traveling, just getting around. So it's that time of year that we are really focused on more activity happening across the state. And just wanted to take the opportunity to really give our listeners a chance to hear about what DelDOT is doing on the safety front. We invest a lot of time and energy in safety. Every day, it's a priority of this department. And I'm very happy to have two guests with us today. We have Peter Haag, who is our Chief Traffic Engineer. So welcome, Peter.
Glad to be here, CR.
And Scott Neidert, who is our Manager of Safety Engineering. Scott, thanks for being here.
Hey, CR, thanks.
So we'll start with you, Peter. Just tell us briefly how long you've been with the department and in your current role.
I've been with the department for almost 18 years, and it's all been in the traffic engineering section. I live and breathe traffic, love it. Glad to be with the department for such a long period of time. I've been in my current role for about 4 or 5 years now. And again, safety is our number one emphasis area, our topic that we're trying to look across, not just within traffic engineering, but within the department as a whole.
Great. And where do you live in Delaware?
So I'm from Milton,
Okay.
Sussex County.
All right.
But our efforts are statewide. I work out of the Transportation Management Center in Smyrna. But again, we're a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week facility. So any concern, any topic, especially safety-related operations, it's our bread and butter of what we focus on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for all you do. And Scott, how about you?
Yeah, so I've been with the department for about 15 years. Again, all in traffic. Came up through the ranks in the traffic safety section along with this guy. So we've been working together for just about my entire career. So I think that the energy and the enthusiasm that the both of us have for this topic, really helps us get things done and bring some new ideas, to the state.
Absolutely. And where do you call home, Scott?
I'm from Milford.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you both for taking time out of your schedules to be here today. And this is something we hear a lot about, both from the public, and it's also just, as you both have stated, something that we are continuing to work on day in and day out. So as we get started, today we're recording, it's April 2nd. Scott, can you just give us a snapshot of where we are this year so far in terms of what we're seeing on Delaware roads and how that compares to last year or even the year before that?
Yeah, sure. So as of today, we have 23 fatalities on our roadways, 5 pedestrian fatalities. But the good news is that we're down about 40% from last year and a little above that from the year before. So we're definitely seeing some improvements in our numbers. Obviously, anything greater than 0 is not acceptable. But the topics we'll discuss and some of our countermeasures are certainly helping to drive those numbers down.
Sure. Well, that is good news that we are seeing some of our numbers start to come down, especially after seeing some very high numbers over the past couple of years. And I also just want to mention for the audience, we deal a lot in numbers. You all do a great job of sharing data with us, and keeping us updated on what the numbers are. But we never forget what's behind those numbers. Sadly, it's for fatalities, it's a life lost. We also have thousands who are seriously injured in crashes each and every year, and that's something that we don't forget. We are always mindful of that. And I just like to take a moment just for us to just pause and reflect on those lives. All right, thank you. So, as we start talking about safety, there's a lot of things that the listener might not be aware of that we are doing, what we are actively working on to address and improve safety across our transportation system. And one of those items is that we actually have a plan. This is not something where we're just responding to specific micro issues. We actually have a broad plan about how we are working to improve safety across our system. Can you talk a little about that? And we'll start with you, Scott.
Yeah, sure. So it's called the Delaware Strategic Highway Safety Plan. We call it the SHSP. It is a 5-year plan that is federally required for all states. So this is not just a Delaware plan requirement, but rather every state in the nation is required to do this. And as part of that plan, we dig through all of our data, all the data that we have, crash data, vehicular volumes, speeds, things like that, and we come up with different what we call emphasis areas. So different focus areas where we're seeing the biggest or the largest proportion of issues. For this plan, we've got 8 data-driven emphasis areas. And so I think, later on in the conversation, we're going to start going through a couple of those and listen out some different projects and countermeasures to combat those fatalities and serious injuries.
And how often do we update that plan?
Yeah, we update it every 5 years.
Okay.
So the current one is from 2021 to 2025. So we'll be working on starting to update that here in the near future.
Great. And for the listener, we'll drop links to these specific things that we were talking about in the show notes so that if you're interested in learning more or seeing it in front of you, we can certainly provide that so you can take a look and if you're interested in learning more. So you can find that on the DelDOT website, and it's our strategic highway safety plan. So, as you mentioned the emphasis areas, Peter, do you want to talk a bit about what those emphasis areas are and how we're really working to address these specific areas?
Sure. So the 8 data-driven emphasis areas are intersections, distracted driving, impaired driving, road departure, unrestrained motorists, speeding, pedestrians, and motorcyclists. Again, they account for about 94% of our fatalities on the roadway and 85% of our serious injuries. There's a lot of linkages between all those emphasis areas, especially with speeding as the topic. We know that the higher the speed, the higher the severity of type crash. So that's where it's kind of combining a lot of those emphasis areas and looking at what we call the 4 E's. So the engineering, the enforcement, the education, and then how emergency services plays into it, really is how the best influence to try to drive those numbers or improve those numbers statewide. Intersections is our highest emphasis area. So a lot of the countermeasures and the areas that we look at to try to deploy, such as what was talked about at the first episode of roundabouts, is an important thing to consider because it reduces the conflict points, it reduces those severity type crashes in order to drive those numbers down.
And we've also seen a concerted effort just over the past year or two, especially in Sussex County, where we're converting a lot of former intersections that may have only been 2-way stops to all-way stops for the very reasons because of increased traffic volume and crashes, correct?
Correct. So the all-way stop implementation, especially in the rural areas, Sussex County, even like Western Kent County, that we've installed them, we've seen numbers that are very mind-blowing. Fatal crashes have been reduced 100%
Wow.
with the implementation of them. Total crashes, angle crashes, serious injuries, every type of category with the implementation of the always has changed in a positive way with the introduction of it. Same as with other countermeasures such as median barrier. We have seen, especially with a lot of the weather events that have occurred, like there has been they've been preventive measures to help deter a cross median type crash, especially on Route 1, where it exists today in Newcastle County.
And I think it's safe to say that an overwhelming majority of the projects that we are implementing across the state, it really starts with safety. There is usually a safety component as to why we're doing a project. 1 in 16, for example, that was the intersection where we were seeing the highest rate of collisions on that Route 1 corridor. Again, so we're building a grade separated interchange. So just examples that the work that is taking place ultimately begins with the work that you and your team are doing, tracking these numbers, seeing where incidents are happening, and that really can be a catalyst for, hey, we need to take a different approach in this one specific area, and what are the options that we have here. I think that's really the starting point for how our projects come to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our projects are not only kind of reactive in nature, but they're also proactive. And, we're starting to shift a little bit more toward the proactive side, where we are looking at the different types of facilities, different types of roadways in different counties, different areas in the state where these types of crashes are happening. And we're implementing these countermeasures. So, you may see new curve warning signs or new pavement markings along the curves, or some kind of surface treatment that will allow tires to adhere to the road, better when they're navigating a curve. We're looking at those in a proactive manner so that, the types of roads we identify, we're able to go out and get those countermeasures put in.
That's great. And they are noticeable. For example, those that are traveling on 95 on a daily basis in northern Delaware, 95 South, we had just a common area right before the Brandywine River Bridge where we would see there's a slight curve. And we've put in the flashing chevrons there. We've also put in the high friction surface treatment there. And what used to be especially a rainy day, a common occurrence of cars sliding because of that curve due to speed or tire conditions, any number of reasons, has been greatly reduced just because of those measures that have been taken. And that might not be greatly obvious to the person as they're traveling throughout their going about their day, but these are things that we're implementing that we hope are driving our numbers down and making roads safer.
Yeah, absolutely. So we call them dynamic chevrons. Folks may have noticed those out and about up in Newcastle County, but those are pilot locations.
Okay.
We hope to install more as funding allows, and we're allowed to select different locations. But we have seen drastic decreases in those numbers of crashes. Another location with similar issues is up in Claymont, up on I-495, approaching I-95. It seems like every time, historically, every time there was some kind of rain event, snow event, there were just dozens of crashes out there, and we know it. So we ended up turning to our maintenance folks, who ended up doing what was called shot blasting, basically roughing the pavement up to allow for those tires to grip the pavement a little bit better.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, these are just a few examples of the things that we're doing. In regards to the plan, how do we evaluate success? What does that look like? Is it solely just we want to see the numbers come down? Can you give a little insight into, obviously this is a 5-year plan. I presume over the next year, the conversation starts about what does the next plan look like? How does what recent history influence our next plan, and what does that look like?
Sure. So In the current plan, what we do is we set up a goal and an objective. So the goal, like everything, towards zero. That's what we're striving for. That's what we're trying to. That's our acceptance is zero. The objective is over the next 5 years within that plan is a 15% reduction in the fatals and the serious injury type crashes. We evaluate that through coordination with our partnering agencies. So Delaware State Police and Office of Highway Safety. We agreed on what is known as a 5-year rolling average. So essentially, it takes 5 consecutive years. It evaluates those 5 years from an average perspective in comparison to each other to find out where do our numbers compare with it. That's one way that we're measuring.
Okay.
The other
Okay.
way is that the pure annual numbers of all of those emphasis areas. We want to see exactly what are we putting out on the roadway? What are we doing? Again, trying to touch those 4 E's. How are we influencing those specific emphasis areas with fatals and serious injuries to see are there success stories that we can continue to implement and show and improve upon in future plans in future years. Again, we mentioned several different examples, even some of the educational campaigns that we're launching. Those are all great things that we're striving to bring those numbers down.
No, that's great, and it's exciting when we can talk about the positive things that are happening, especially as our population continues to grow. We're now a state that has more than 1 million people. For a long time, it was even talking to persons in other states and things like that, and tiny Delaware, and we are starting to see this become a busier place, and with that comes the need for an emphasis on safety to ensure that everyone is moving about as safely as possible. So it's great that we have a plan in terms of how we're addressing those needs.
And even too with that CR, we are working with our partnering states, such as Maryland as a prime example, with a lot of knowing that the Route 1 corridor has that resort atmosphere and the turnover is changing, that educational message crosses the Delaware Maryland line through Ocean City so that the same messaging, the same kind of information is shared both between the adjacent states, so that are getting more bang for our buck on that topic of safety. Just to give an example, so the Happy Crab campaign is typically the historical campaign that we've done through the beach area and through Ocean City, whether it's billboards, sidewalk decals, you name it. It has been a collaboration between adjacent states.
Yeah, no, again, it's that type of messaging that resonates and gets people's attention. So that's great to hear that we continue to, we're not in a silo. We are, all states are working on safety issues. So especially here in the Mid Atlantic, where states are, it's easy to travel through numerous states in a short amount of time. Hearing that we are collaborating on those efforts. So, we've talked about our plan and, what our goals are and how we're, tracking where, how we're doing in improving safety. I thought it would be good for us to share with our listeners, how we are working to accomplish those goals. Obviously it's, there's no magic wand. There's a lot of work that goes into how do we make our transportation system as safe as possible for all users. And, one of those things that, I've been excited about is learning from you all is our safe system approach. So, this is, I think, just a new way of thinking about infrastructure. And, Peter, if you could just, introduce us to what the safe system approach is and how we're incorporating that into our work.
Sure. So the safe system approach, it's a new philosophy from our partners at Federal Highway Administration that has been adopted by other countries. And they've seen success from a safety standpoint. So essentially, it changes the 4E evaluation process to more about 6 principles and 5 elements. So the 6 principles are really accepted. We understand that death and serious injury is unacceptable.
Right.
Period. It's towards 0.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to see it on our roadways. We're accepting that humans make mistakes. There is that vulnerability, again, the behavior of a driver, of a user, of any type of infrastructure. Mistakes will be made along that area. However, humans are vulnerable. There's only a certain level that a human body can be put through,
Right.
and it's a certain tolerable condition. Responsibility is shared. So that's where through the strategic plan, as we mentioned, like the partnering agencies that make up our core committee is one thing, but we have several other stakeholders, agencies, outside entities that participate in that plan, which again, understanding that the safety component is shared as a whole. We're looking at proactive implementation. So some of the things that we're project-wise, how do we incorporate, how do we separate modes, how do we look at changing an intersection or implementing some type of device proactively from more of a risk standpoint than pure numbers and data that exists today. And then by doing so, redundancy is critical. Continuing to do the same thing over and over again is key so that if one of those principles fails within the system, there's other things that are there to deter that or help that fatal or serious injury from not occurring.
And I think a great example of this is a project that's been underway in Newcastle County on Route 13, where we have about a 7-mile stretch where we've just seen that continue to be an area where we have higher incidents of pedestrian fatalities and crashes. And, just listening to you talk through what the safe system approach is and the work that's happening up there, it's improving lighting, adding more crosswalks. It's adding median barrier to deter people from just crossing mid block, as we call it, really driving them to a signalized intersection where we have a crosswalk so that they are crossing in a safe manner across what is a very busy road. So, understanding that just, we have to, look at what that mindset is as well. And that's, really people are always looking for the easiest way from point A to point B. So, putting in a new system here that is really funneling and preventing people from making poor decisions and helping them, get to an area that's, safe, is making a big difference in, hopefully, saving lives.
Correct. And so when we started the pedestrian safety audit along with 13, we acknowledged that while we were going through the audit, we needed to put roadway lighting along that roadway. So it was an early action item before the audit was even completed to get roadway lighting along that roadway. And we're doing that for routinely with a lot of our pedestrian safety audits that we're doing statewide, is we know that there's that correlation between nighttime driving crashes as well as just the improvement that it has to the corridor to then see the visibility side of it of the pedestrian, that vulnerable road user. So definitely agree the 13 project is a great example of a safe system approach.
What are some other projects that are underway, maybe even in Kent or Sussex County, where we are, we're incorporating that approach as well?
So the one that comes to my mind is the current median barrier contract along Route 1 from just south of the airbase to Milford, to Route 30 in Milford. We have seen a substantial decrease in crashes, fatalities, serious injuries. As you know, cross-median crashes are some of the most severe types of crashes that we have out there, usually ending in, unfortunately, fatalities.
Right.
And with the speeds increasing along Route 1 and, other divided highways in the state, we saw it as a great opportunity to take what we know about this system and just extend it further south. We're looking at other roadways within the state to do the same thing. But this is a great example of kind of a proactive approach, something that will lessen the impact of a human body, involved in a crash. And it's just a great countermeasure that other states are implementing, but we are really kind of taking the reins and implementing them where we can.
It's great to hear, and again, that it's noticeable. And even this past winter, for example, when we actually had some snow, and there were a couple incidents where we had pictures of cars that had, again, they just because of the conditions gone into that barrier, but did not go any further because it prevented that vehicle from crossing and really creating a much more serious situation. So it's definitely noticeable, having that there. Again, and you may not think about it until a situation arises where you're glad it's there. So it's something that it's great to see the department continuing to invest in that type of project. And in terms of even looking in Sussex County, and I know we've spent a lot of time, just we're not only trying to manage the growing population, but moving people around outside of their vehicles, and that's something where we're focusing on bikes specifically. We're the departments, we're really excited about the upcoming project that will complete the Georgetown to Lewis Trail. That will be when completed, a 17-mile largely low stress bike network where you can go from Georgetown all the way to Lewis and then pick up other trails and ride into Rehoboth and continue, making your way around our eastern Sussex communities. Can you talk a little bit about how that we're trying to it's not just about moving cars from point A to point B as quickly as possible, and really thinking about all users on our transportation system.
Sure. So the Georgetown to Lewis Trail is a great example from a safe system approach because you're separating the modes, and physically providing that separation. So when you physically provide that separate alternative route, especially from a low stress standpoint, our focus now when you come across intersection crossings at along those trails, how do we provide an engineering countermeasure such as a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, median islands, things of that nature to now slow the speeds along that roadway and allow a motor vehicle come to a yielding or a stop condition to allow the vulnerable road user to cross the roadway. So again, that's a great example of really honing in on and accepting that separation is key. And we do that with a lot of our other projects when you start looking at providing shared use paths, providing sidewalk connections that may not exist today, to other trails and connections. Other examples that we're doing in the Route 1 in the Bethany area, we have some rectangular rapid flashing beacons around the trails just north of Bethany Beach that we're going to be implementing to help those vulnerable road users, the bikes, the pedestrians, get across Route 1 in a safer manner and allow the device to activate and indicate to the motorist that something is in the roadway and is trying to cross.
Well, that's great to hear that, again, all just these examples of how we are, making our system safer across the board. And, I appreciate you both, sharing your thoughts and insights on both our strategic highway safety plan and also the safe system approach. And that leads me to, we're excited about coming up later in April is our first annual safety summit. So, can you talk about why we felt the time was now to have a dedicated safety summit and what we're hoping to accomplish on that day?
Sure. So the Delaware Highway Safety Summit is April 17th. It's at the Chase Center on the riverfront. Uh, we have attendees from across the board that involve safety. Different vendors, different advocacy groups, agencies, you name it. Again, really hone in on those 4 E's to try to touch on. So the biggest thing is an unfortunate thing with having the high fatalities over this last few years. It's re- we are in the need of bringing those partners together to then look at things in a different manner and approaching things in a different way of thinking and an application wise, especially with the safe system approach. Again, looking in that proactive measure and being redundant and critical. And so, what I've told a lot of individuals, especially those that are speaking at the event, this is a platform to express what you're doing and how you're changing and what you're influencing from safety. And can other entities and other agencies latch onto that idea and now start implementing that somewhere else? Um, so we have roughly over 200 people that are in attendance. We have about 25 different vendors that, again, from various entities and areas of influence. There'll be some simulations and some actual touching aspects there. Especially, we'll have our signals and signing displays at the event, as well as state police having some simulators as well. But again, the biggest thing is just safety as a whole. What are we all doing? How can we now improve upon things moving forward? It also is giving us a good platform to move into our new strategic highway safety plan that's going to be adopted for the starting in 2026. So it's our initial kickoff of that new plan, what we're trying to focus in on, how we're going to tackle that in the future.
Well, that's exciting to hear, and I know we're looking forward to it. And depending on when you're listening to this episode, if this is already in the past, we'll share. We'll drop links into the show notes where you can access information on both everything we've talked about today, from the Safety Summit to the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and really just provide information again that strengthens everyone's mindset on safety. And while we have talked a lot about what DelDOT is working on, at the beginning of this episode, you likely saw Secretary Majeski talking about our new Be Delaware campaign, and we're encouraging all of you to join us in this effort to be a hero towards zero. We're working hard to make our roads safe, and we need everyone, when they walk out the front door in the morning, that they're thinking about being safe on in their travels as well, not only for themselves, but for everyone else that's out there, whether there's people using public transportation, walking, biking, in other vehicles. It's really, something we need this to be a collaborative effort. We need everybody to be having that safety mindset. And we encourage you to learn more about this Be Delaware campaign. You're going to be seeing a lot more of it already on our billboards and messaging that we are doing. Again, just asking that everyone really make a concerted effort to put safety first. So, with that being said, I want to thank you both for taking time to share your thoughts and insight and on the work that you're doing. And we're grateful for that work. It's important work, and it's making a difference. And ultimately, the goal here is saving lives. And that's something that deserves to be acknowledged and recognized. So, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Scott. We really appreciate you sharing your insights today. And for you, the listener, thank you for taking the time to join us. You can find our previous episode on YouTube as well, if you hadn't had a chance to learn about roundabouts with our Deputy Secretary Shantae Hastings. And if you have any thoughts or comments about the podcast or some suggested future topics, please take a moment to send us an email. You can send that to a dotpr@delaware.gov and just put the podcast topic in the subject line, and we'll get back to you. We're continuing to look for ideas for future podcast topics and are excited to keep the conversation going and want to have topics that are of interest to our audience about what's happening in transportation across the state of Delaware. So with that, I'm C.R. McLeod. Thanks so much for joining us again on the Move with DelDOT. Until next time, take care.
Thank you for taking the time to learn about what's happening in transportation across our state. If you have any questions about what you heard in this episode, please let us know in the comments. Be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms linked in the description.